Um, so Steph, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to say before we start, anything else you wanted to add to my introduction?
Wow, yeah, it brought up quite a lot actually, just remembering that we are all have all different needs and that bodies change. So even if you don't have these needs or an understanding of another person's needs now, you know, newsflash, your body's going to change and, you know, ultimately decay and break down, and you will have to kind of find ways to move in the world. So it is that we're all coming from a different place because of how our bodies have come to being like this today, but also they will continually change. We're always in a state of flux and change in our bodies and our minds, as we know, in the world. And so that brought that up. And also, yeah, that kind of thing you were saying about how it can bring up this sort of feeling of guilt and shame when you start kind of thinking, what have I done in the past to kind of harm my students? Maybe I didn't welcome that person in, and maybe I, you know, taught them some anatomy that has now been disproved. And so, you know, it's worth remembering that we all feel like that. And, you know, you have to forgive yourself and, you know, learn new knowledge as it comes and incorporate it as best you can. And definitely just forgive yourself and learn new stuff, you know, knowing that you may have trained years and years ago and all the anatomy has changed, all the bodies have changed, all the people that are showing up to yoga are changing. So all you're doing is actually keeping up to date. So it's a blessing that you can do that rather than like, oh shit, what have I done wrong all these years?
Thank you, that's really validating. I was just, yeah, that was definitely where that came from. I was like, I think everyone else feels the same as me. So the first question that I had for you is, what led you to set up a specifically accessible yoga teacher training?
Well, I think basically I am a broken yoga teacher, and I think that really helped. I trained as a yoga teacher years ago in my 20s, and I was fit as a fiddle. And within about 2 years, I had a life-threatening accident where I fell off a mountain and broke a lot of my body and was incapacitated for a long time. And this was the biggest blessing I could have ever been given, because it forced me into a different way of practicing, a different kind of way of seeing yoga. I was no longer able to attach myself to physical practices, and I had to find my peace of mind or my state of yoga from other practices such as breathing and meditation. And I started moving in accessible circles, and I started kind of appreciating pain and suffering in the body much more. And then when I started my teacher training, I've always really thought that yoga should be inclusive. I think the fact that I trained before yoga became particularly famous, and definitely before social media, before Instagram, before modern yoga centers even. You know, when I trained, there were ashrams and there were yoga centers, but they were specific. You know, the Iyengar would have centers or Shivananda would have centers. There weren't this concept of a modern city yoga center, and there was definitely no social media. So we just kind of put leaflets through people's doors, inviting them to the church hall that we'd rented or the dance studio that we rented. And it was very different space. People would come wanting stress relief. They didn't want fitness necessarily. They didn't want to look a certain way. At least that was my experience. It was a different time. And then I was able to watch as yoga became popular. And I would say, you know, for me, there was a point when Facebook arrived, and also Jerry Halliwell and Madonna arrived on the yoga scene. And there was sort of, these were changing times. It became a more fitness-led industry. It became kind of infused with yoga gear and beautiful bottoms. And so I was just witness to all of that and saw how it changed. But I kind of believed that, you know, yoga was for helping peace of mind. So any body comes, the body is the way in, and we find, you know, ways to move the body to lead you to a state of mind. And then when I started teaching yoga, training yoga teachers, I was more or less teaching able-bodied yogis how to teach accessible yoga. So that was part of my thing, like we adapt, this is how we adapt. So I was teaching accessible yoga, but to more able-bodied teachers. That was how it started. And then, well, news got round and Jeevana got a hold of me, and he flicked me into new directions, where then I've been challenged to train yoga teachers, train people who are less able-bodied to represent yoga in the yoga world. So instead of having an able-bodied teacher standing at the front of the class telling you all different adaptations you can do, or all modifications, which is still very necessary, I've had to up my game. And that's been a huge challenge for me, but a great one, to actually be able to bring in some less able-bodied teachers to represent yoga. And so that's kind of, I think, word gets around, it's a little bit more niche, and then Jeevana gets hold of you and you've had it.
It sounds almost like the way that you perceive your teacher training should have been taught anyway is actually quite aligned to what you were doing, and you've had to just adapt that a bit more. But it's kind of your ethos anyway, that's how teacher training should be. And I guess that leads into my next question, which is, so what does accessible yoga mean to you?
I think the main thing for me is just welcoming everyone who comes to your class, acknowledging them as people on a different spectrum of bodily needs, seeing yoga as bigger than a physical practice, but just having a conversation rather than, giving a teaching. Having conversations with different bodies, finding out what people need. So it does kind of beg this less hierarchical, more of a circle, and it is more of a conversation than a lecture. And that to me is everything. I don't know everything, and so I ask, how are you? How does this feel? Could we get this sort of stretch in a different way that makes you feel happy? And I think the other part of it is seeing yoga as a pleasurable thing, not a punitive thing that you have to do because you've eaten too many crisps or because you want to look like someone else. Just finding some pleasure in the poses, which I think we've lost a bit of that over the years. I think we can be very, we want to feel challenged and we want to feel pushed, which I understand those things, but also if you see yoga as bringing a bit of balance to your life, what you've done all week maybe has been challenging and pushing you. Maybe what you need from your weekly yoga class is complete opposite to bring that balance, or if you've been very sedentary in your life, sitting at a computer, maybe you need that kind of boost and you need that powerful thing. And I don't see why we can't include it all in a yoga class, why we can't hold space for whatever you need, and so that's sort of, to me, more accessible yoga. Oh, you've gone.
Seem to have lost Megan. Oh, sure she'll be back in a moment. I was just looking, because like a square went and was like, what square was it? The most important one. It did.
You have to unmute yourself, Megan.
Unmute, Megan.
Classically, my Wi-Fi is lost in my house, but it's all right. I've joined on my phone. So
Very
nothing
good.
Challenge. Steph, had you finished speaking to that answer?
I had, yeah.
You had. And you might have said this before I got cut off, but one of the questions I had was, can a class really be accessible for everybody? Have you ever had a situation where you've been stumped what to do? And if so, how do you deal with that situation?
I actually do think that every class can be accessible. I actually do believe it. I also think it should be. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a master of chair yoga or a master of, the props, and you don't have to get it all right. But I think for a class to be accessible, it just has to invite everybody in the room to participate and to be interested in everyone in the room, so that you can actually kind of give a shit, really. Just sort of invite that space. So I think it can be accessible. I mean, if there are things that people have to omit from doing, like if I can't move my legs, then I'm not going to suddenly, be able to move my legs in an accessible class, but I might, I will find a way of incorporating as much as I can. I will focus on the arms, or if there's a pose like, say, Warrior 2, if I'm in a chair, then I will maybe move my legs into position, or maybe concentrate on the strength of the arms. If I've had a wrist or shoulder injury and I'm practicing Warrior 2, then I'll be concentrating on my legs. So it can all be made accessible in some way or other, depending on your sort of huge vision of accessible yoga, or just your invitation, to experiment with the pose. If I was doing a standing forward bend and I had a spinal injury, it would just look different, because I probably wouldn't be flexing my spine, but I could use a wall or a chair to flex my hips. These tiny little changes mean that it's become accessible. And I've invited people to experience that level of accessibility. So lots and lots of opportunities and invitations rather than levels that you're trying to get to. Like, this is level 1, you're rubbish. This is level 2, you're mediocre. This is level 3, you've passed the yoga exam. You know, just invitation. Like, some days you'll want to put weight on your hands because you're feeling strong. Some days you won't want to do that, knowing that everybody in their lives are going to have different needs generally, but also from moment to moment, from in a cycle, or in a female cycle, we're going to have different days where we want to do full on power. In a whole range of a lifetime, you know, with age, with accidents and injuries, there'll be times when we want more and we want less. So using invitational language and offering lots of opportunities and just checking in, like having a look around, seeing if that person's like falling over, seeing if that person's like really breathing too fast and just sort of like taking all their energy just to keep up, which is going to risk them hurting themselves. Just checking in and caring rather than being a performer. I think that really helps.
So is it crucial to have really good anatomy knowledge, or can you get by in another way?
You definitely can get by in another way. I think anatomy knowledge will come as you go along. Most of it comes from learning from your students. So if I had a student come to me and they had a particular area of need, like, you know, they've got a rotator cuff injury, you know, if you start teaching a range of women in their 50s, you're going to find rotator cuff injuries. If you've got someone who's like hurt their ankle, then what you do is you talk to them, see how they feel, you know, offer them the obvious props like not weight bearing, or if they got an ankle thing, have a chair, use a wall so that you're not struggling, and then go home and Google it. Go home and research and find out how you can serve them better. And if you're lucky, they will come back and you'll be able to feed them with more knowledge. You know, I think if you start with the things that they should maybe avoid, and then afterwards you can get a bit more therapeutic. But also there's a difference between accessible yoga and yoga therapy. You know, you're not a yoga therapist at a 200-hour level, even at an accessible yoga training level. You're not a yoga therapist. So really, you're just trying not to hurt the people. But then you can suggest things that might build up, or you suggest they Google the same site that you Googled that might give them ideas of how to strengthen the areas that are weak. But mainly your job is to kind of not get them to do the things that would hurt themselves, which, you know, with a very basic anatomy knowledge you can do. And then what happens is you kind of get a bit addicted to the anatomy, and you might start learning more anyway because you become fascinated by the body. But at first it's just using common sense, really pulling poses apart, having kind of a plethora of options. You know, if you were planning a class, I would suggest that you always had an option in the back of your mind. If you wanted to do, you know, a certain pose, then you want to have, you know, your most obvious restrictive bodies, you want to have a little backup for them and a backup for them, you know, maybe arms free, maybe feet free, so that you've kind of got a little bit of knowledge. And then you get really into kind of changing the orientation and splitting the yoga pose up and seeing what you're really trying to get for that person and how they could get it in a different way.
It's really reassuring. It sounds like with a bit of trial and error and a bit of Google and good communication, that anyone who's a yoga teacher can actually learn how to make it accessible. So yeah, thank you for that. And I guess that then leads me on to, so what does an accessible yoga class look like? If we're trying to adapt for everyone in the room, I'm imagining it looks pretty different from a kind of let's all just flow for a sequence and not talk and just hear the teacher shout out cues. So what does it look like?
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. It's chaos in the most beautiful way ever. I have actually harnessed the hashtag yoga props chaos for my classes, because everyone's going to need different stuff, right? You know, everyone is going to probably need, you know, some people have chairs, some people will have walls, some people have props, some people will have their own chairs that they bring into class. So it does look a bit messy, but what we try to do, because we realize that there is this element of chaos, we also remember that we want to bring this unity and harmony into what we're doing. So there's certain things we do, we workshop ways of working, and then we put it all together and we all try to work together. And that's where the beauty really happens. So for example, why do we do sun salutation? Sun salutation is this kind of sequence of poses. And we do it to get the group energy going, to kind of, you know, move as a group, which is very attractive. And I know that that's what attracts a lot of people to doing sequencing and moving together, because there's some special beauty in that, like everyone working together. So just because you're an accessible yoga teacher doesn't mean that you don't get to do that. It means that you might have to workshop it first and kind of come up with a few ways of working together, so that then you can kind of put it together. And you might do it, you might attempt to do it. I remember actually the first time I taught Jackie, we just went through some salutations, and I offered as many, you know, options as I could. But after that class, I asked her how she was, and she actually said to me, that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to be able to do that. And so I was like, okay, we'll find a way with this work, with this work, with this work. So we went back to the class, and without saying, you know, that it was this person that said this and had this needs, I was able to say to the whole group, we're going to try it like this, because it's interesting. It's interesting to change it up. It's interesting for everyone to feel how this would feel. Let's all try with the chair. Let's all try with the wall. Let's all try with blocks. So that we were able to find a way of making it work for her, where she sort of said to me privately, but also not shaming her, not, you know, calling her out. So there's a way of kind of bringing everyone together, noticing all the time, maybe having private conversations, but also the other people don't need to know why you're doing it, you know. So you can be a little bit canny. I can't even remember what the question was, but I hope I'm
was what the classes look like, but I'm really getting a picture of it. And I like what you say, that it's not that you can't have that flow, but it's
Frozen again. Oh no.
Till I see what questions she had on my list.
Yeah, go for it. I was going to say, you got it there.
Yeah, I got it. Let's have a look.
so how do we ensure we're empowering rather than
Yes, how do we ensure we're empowering rather than
taking on a savior complex or othering?
I like that one, taking on the savior complex. Well, I think we're not trying to rescue anyone, and we're not trying to fix anyone, and I think that that has to come through as well, because, you know, yoga is transformative without a doubt. We do practice yoga, you know, well, we maybe practice yoga for change, maybe we don't practice yoga for change, but change will come through practicing yoga. But you don't want to be like, do this and you'll get better, do this and you'll get healthy, do this, because there's some people that will never be healthy, you know, they're born unhealthy, and that's, you know, that's, it's part of their lives. So by constantly telling them that if they just did yoga better, they'd feel better or be more healthy or be able to walk again or be able to, you know, do stuff that they could do when they were 20, you're not really helping them. You're actually kind of making them feel less than. So, but I think, you know, the transformation of yoga comes from accepting the limiting aspects of your body. And that is empowering, that acceptance of, you know, that's okay. I can still feel like, you have to sort of strip it back to what you're actually trying to give people in a yoga class. The body is the way in, undoubtedly. It's how we reach our true self. It's the philosophy of yoga is that we're trying to find this state of mind, which is yoga as a state of mind, not as a pose. And the body is, of course, the way in. It's most of the reason, you know, we're all here, because we had that from a physical practice. But it's the beginning, and it has to, you know, lead us to this kind of movement of energy around the body, which helps us calm the mind and then feel at peace, and to face life's challenges gracefully without completely losing the plot every time something goes wrong, or some part of your body stops working, or, you know, Boris says something. So it's kind of like enabling you to find that peace of mind. Now, we don't have to fit into a certain pose to find that peace of mind. You know, if you put me into a certain pose, I might like lose the plot completely. You might take me away from the state of yoga by trying to put me into a shape that is not right for my body. But by offering me different ways of experiencing openness and energy flow, which was, you know, the point of the yoga poses, was to move yoga around, then you might enable me to hit on something very open and accepting. And that's, I think, how to empower people, to give people ideas of how to move their bodies and how to feel really good in a physical body. I mean, you know, maybe they'll never feel really good in a physical body, because obviously that might never happen as well. But to also know that if you have a body, you probably need to move it as much as you can to keep it mobile and to get more efficiency and, you know, long life out of it. I think that's kind of agreed, that we need to move. We don't need to do gymnastics, but we do need to move, and we need to breathe. So even enabling the lungs to open, you know, the upper body to have enough space to breathe properly, so that your organs are massaged with every breath, so that everything just works properly, because it's your vehicle, isn't it? So empowering people and not rescuing them, not trying to take away their special abilities, you know, their superpowers. As, you know, maybe less able-bodied people, they have superpowers that we can't dream of. And that's another reason I was kind of into yoga, accessible yoga, is because I find that most people who have problems with their bodies get yoga much more easily than people who have never had any problems with their yoga. So, you know, you're teaching very young, very fit bodies, and they'll get the yoga and they'll get the asana aspect, but it might take them a long time to grasp any, you know, concept of immortality, you know, challenge. You know, and a lot of it comes with wisdom of the age, but a lot of it comes just from never having experienced any restrictions on your body. So teaching accessible yoga then becomes this honor, where you get an insight into someone's life who's already had to kind of go through these questions in their minds, go through like, what is the point of life? What am I doing? How can I be at peace when, you know, I can't move anymore? They've already done that really deep philosophical stuff that I want to learn from them.
And you've sort of already answered beautifully a lot of this question, but I wonder if you have anything else to add about what you've learned from this work. And I'm hearing there's a lot there. If there's anything else you wanted to say to that.
Yeah, I'm just learning as I go along. You know, what have I learned? I've learned that it's a beautiful way. I've learned that, I don't know what I've learned. I just love it. I couldn't do it any other way. And I think that it's the most compassionate form of body work I can give to the world, I can offer. It's just ideas that we can, and I'm learning ideas off the people that I'm teaching. And it's this two-way street that it goes beyond yoga. I don't even know if I teach yoga anymore half the time. I'm using the body to get to that philosophy, to that heart opening, to that acceptance, to that movement of prana. So, you know, even I was running a grief circle on Friday, and we were doing yoga, we were kind of doing yoga, but it was more movement therapy to enable energy to move, presuming that, you know, it gets stuck in the body and we have these patterns of holding, and just enabling that kind of release. And more importantly, for most of the accessible yoga work for me is about the nervous system response, you know, getting to that getting out of that fight or flight and into that rest and digest, you know, which enables us to process, you know, what trauma our bodies are giving us. And and the answers that we need that were coming from inside.
Steph, I wish we had another hour. I know I'm going to feel like this of every single one of you, but we're going to bring the questions to a close and just thank you so much. There's so much richness in what you've said, and I feel like every sentence I want to unpack more. So really glad that we've got this recorded so I can watch it back. And you have really kindly offered to take us through.
Yes, I am going to take you through
about how we might adapt.
Yeah, so I'm going to move my computer now, and I might lose microphone, so you can tell me if you can hear me in a minute. Let's put.
And I should have asked everyone right at the beginning, but if you have a chair and or either some yoga blocks or a couple of books, and you want to come along and have a go at this with us, please grab those now. And Steph, do you want to say something, and we'll see if we can hear you? We can't, so I wonder if the plug pulled out. Yeah, it looks like it did.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start teaching much yoga online. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. I'm putting the microphone on the floor. Just one more thumbs up if you can hear me. Awesome. Yeah, so I thought I would show you.
We can hear you.
Excellent. I thought I could show you 3 versions of sun salutations. One is on a chair, so it's a chair sun salutation. One will be using a chair in front of you as a prop, and one will be with 2 blocks. And with this amount of knowledge that I can share with you today, you'll get kind of enough to kind of change and modify and give ideas to anyone really in a yoga class, hopefully. And there's an infinite amount of things we can do. But if I just, if you want to join in, that'd be amazing. I'll start with the chair sun salutation. I'll actually take my top off so you can see better. So if you were in a chair, if you were chair bound, or if you were, got tired legs or had a hip replacement or knee injuries or whatever, you would do your practice in a chair. And I would come to the front of the chair if I could, not always possible. I'd have my feet flat on the floor and just thinking about just a normal sun salutation. Obviously, I don't really think that exists, but we're just going to flow through different positions with the breath. So I'd breathe in a sitting mountain pose with my heels under my knees. And as I breathed out, maybe I'd bring my hands into prayer position. And I'd breathe in and I'd take my arms up. Maybe they won't go up. I might lift my spine. And as I breathed out, I would move into a forward bend. And I'd come down very gently as far as I wanted to. And then I'd breathe in and I'd come back to my sitting mountain. And as I breathed out, I'd pick up my right leg and squeeze it into my chest. And then I breathe in to come back to sitting mountain. And I breathe out into angry cat, moving my hands forward and tipping on my pelvis, bringing my chin to my chest. And then I breathe in and I drag my hands up my thighs and I root my pelvis, my pubic bone forward, and I squeeze my shoulders back into cow. And then I'd exhale. Now here it's quite interesting because I could either go to angry cat again, or I could attempt a down dog on the chair, pressing the heels forward and moving the pelvis forward and making that triangle shape. And then as I inhale again, I would come back to the chair. And as I exhale, I pick up the other leg, squeeze it into my chest. And then as I inhale, I'd straighten the spine, drop the foot, lift up my hands. And as I exhale, I bring my hands back down. Let's go through that one more time. Inhale, stretch up. Exhale into a forward bend, however you like. Inhale back to sitting mountain. And exhale, squeezing one of the legs in. Inhale, drop the foot back down. And as you exhale, into angry cat. Inhale, into happy cow. Exhale, remember you can do angry cat again, or you can attempt the down dog in the air in different orientation. Inhale, back to sitting mountain. Exhale, squeezing the knee into the chest. Inhale, stretch the arms up as you place the foot back down. And exhale, hands in prayer. And this can be done alongside people who are standing. So if I was teaching anyone who kind of doesn't want to go all the way to the floor, maybe they've got a bigger body, or maybe they don't want to weight bear, they've got wrist and shoulder injuries, I'd have them have a chair there. Also, if they have got problems with mobility, stepping the legs back, I'd suggest they use a chair. It's really nice and very, very easy. I've always got people using chairs in my classes. So I'd stand in front of the chair, all 4 legs of the chair on the mat so they don't slip. And I'd inhale and I'd exhale, bring my hands together. And I'd inhale, take my arms up. As I exhale, I'd bend my knees, bring my hands to the chair, and I might go into restorative forward bend with my head on the chair. And then taking hold of the side of the chair, I'd inhale, take my left leg back into a lunge. And then I'd exhale and bring my feet together a little bit further away from the chair. And then I'd inhale and do my my cow. And then I'd exhale and do my angry cat. And then I'd inhale once again. And then I'd exhale and take my legs back a little bit more and do a downward facing dog with my chair. From here, as I inhale, I'd step my left leg forward into a high lunge. And as I exhale, I'd come back to my standing forward bend using the chair. And then soften my knees, lift my chest, and inhale, bring my body back up. And exhale, hands down. Let's run through that really quickly again. Inhale, stretch the arms up. And exhale, you're in a forward bend using the chair. So you're just limiting how much gravity you're dropping down. Inhale, step one leg back into your lunge. And then exhale, just positioning your feet in a kind of tabletop position. So that inhaling, you can do your cow stretch. Exhaling, you can do your angry cat. Inhale, doing a cow again. And then exhaling, moving the legs back so you can stretch into a downward facing dog. Inhale, take the leg forward again into your high lunge. And then exhaling, a standing forward bend. And then softening the knees, lifting the chest and coming up as you inhale. And as you exhale, bringing the hands together. And then finally, we can use a variation with some salutations using a couple of blocks. So I have them on their medium setting at the front of the mat. And obviously people can change even through there. There's like so many ways. And people might need a chair for the forward bend and then the blocks for their lunge and maybe different settings for the blocks all the time. I've got the blocks in front of my feet. I'm going to take a deep breath in, and as I breathe out, bring the hands together. And as I breathe in, I'm going to stretch up. And as I breathe out, softening my knees, I'm going to come into my forward bend using the blocks. So it could be high, medium, or low setting. Keeping my hands on the blocks, I'm going to take my right leg back as I inhale and drop the knee. And then as I exhale, I'm going to come into plank, but I could also come into tabletop here. I'm going to inhale here, and then as I exhale, I could even come to chaturanga here, or I could come to knees, chest, chin, or I could come to angry cat. And then as I inhale, I could come to up dog, or I could do my cow again. As I exhale, I could do angry cat or down dog. So you see how it's coming together? As I inhale, I'm going to bring my foot forward into my lunge. I might even drop my knee, my back knee. As I exhale, I'll be in a standing forward bend. And as I inhale, I can come up, stretch up. As I exhale, I bring my hands slowly down. So as we put it together, you've got the choice of anything you want during this practice. So I'd love to lead you through a multi-dimensional approach if I can. So I'm going to demonstrate on the chair, but I'm going to do it. Can you all hear me still? Okay, last one, I promise. So taking whatever props you want, or maybe you want to practice doing something that's unfamiliar to you. You take a deep breath in. As you breathe out, you bring the hands together. And as you breathe in, you stretch the arms up. And as you breathe out, you come into a forward bend of your choice. Use the chair, you can use the blocks. And then inhaling, you'll come to your lunge if you're on your feet, or if you're on your chair, you're coming back to sitting mountain. And as you exhale, squeeze the knee into your chest if you're on a chair, or come into angry cat. And then inhaling, we're into our cow pose. And exhaling, we're in our angry cat, or you're going knees, chest, and chin to the floor. Inhaling, maybe up dog, maybe cobra. And exhaling, down dog, or you can do another angry cat. Inhaling, you're going to come back to tabletop, or you're going to take your leg forward into a lunge, and exhaling, pulling that knee into the chest if you're on a chair. Inhaling, stretching up now from a standing forward bend. And exhaling, hands come back to center. And that's it from me. I hope that gives lots of ideas. It's kind of tricky to put it all together, and you wouldn't really need to give that many options in a class. But you can just see what happens in your class and see around you who needs what. Okay.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. I can't believe how quickly you managed to go through so many different options so seamlessly. Wow.
Possibly too many, but you know, it gives you ideas then for your practice. You don't have to use them all at all, and they won't all be available in every class, but at least you've got some in the memory bank.
Absolutely, and really great to have run through that ourselves and have that more kind of visceral memory of actually doing it and how it feels. So thank you so much for sharing.